here, and it's recording, yeah? Okay, and let's see, the waiting room, is the waiting room off?
That should be off. So you want to take the 3 buttons on the very far right.
Here?
Far right.
Oh, here, thank you.
And the second one.
This one, thank you. Okay. And it's recording, okay. And then go to, so far so good, and then I have to open up another Chrome. Go to Cyber Campus. Here. I think this, oh, 3 dots. I thought I clicked that, okay. And 3 dots, thank you. Cyber Campus, thank you. Log in. Okay. Why is it not English? Here, English. You go here, here. Go to attendance. Week 9. Smart attendance. And so far so good. Go to here.
네, 이놈 일국의 궁사가 쥐새끼처럼 이 밤에 기어드는
이땐
썩 물러가지 못할까?
발포함 살아나로 항해에 나타나 오해르시오.
Popularity of films like this that are indicated to me that Koreans will pay the cost of reunification. They will pay the price.
내가 있는 한 너희들은 단 한 걸음도 밖에 다가설 수 없다.
힘케어기 아시오스테드나도 그 전화를 스치버리나. 다가 나도 분명히 나의 조세. 絶対日本を超えられたんだ。
やれ。
You get the point. And of course, Polish people and French people, but particularly East European people, Polish people, Hungarian people, they're not any less nationalistic than the Korean people, right? Like we said earlier, it is not really possible to fully understand politics unless we understand the impact of emotion. Emotion. This is all about emotion, right? Emotion. And to try to understand systematically how emotion impacts European integration or the reintegration of North and South Korea, we need to understand nationalism. We need to understand identity. And at the same time, we say nationalism is something which is a natural human tendency that human beings show to form in groups of people that they feel very strongly about on a very large level, as big as China, for example, or as small as Iceland. Iceland only has 300,000 people live there, and Icelandic nationalism is strong. But we also need to understand that even though we must accommodate nationalism, nationalism can also associate with authoritarian values, like we talked about at a previous class, and as you mentioned in your essays about fascism, authoritarian populism. Nationalism can associate with authoritarian values, as we saw in Europe in the 1930s with fascism and Nazism, and also imperial Japanese regime. And nationalism, depending on the context, can associate with liberal values of democracy and capitalism, like we saw in Eastern Europe in the 1970s and 1980s, as the dissidents in those countries, in communist Poland, communist Czechoslovakia, demanded self-determination so that they could have freedom, so they could have democratic elections and human rights. So nationalism can associate with different kinds of values, other kinds of values, liberal values, authoritarian values, usually with liberal values. And that had been the dominant understanding of the role of nationalism in bringing about the springtime of nations, or the Arab Spring in 2011 in the Middle East. But then we see today a movement of nationalism to associate more and more with authoritarian values, like the law as represented by, for example, in Poland, the Law and Justice Party, and in Hungary with Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party, or United States with Donald Trump and his white nationalist party. So we see nationalism associating with authoritarian values in Putin's Russia, and also with authoritarian values in other parts of the world. So it can change. And I'm trying to give a context for the understanding the reading that you are doing now in the textbook, because it describes Europeanization, and it describes the efforts to Europeanize these nation states that are the homeland of nationalism, right? The first big manifestation or showing of nationalism in world politics was the French Revolution in 1789. Europe gave us the first nation states. And these nation states are the foundation of the European Union. So they try to associate these European nationalisms of French nationalism, German nationalism, Italian nationalism, now Polish nationalism, Hungarian nationalism, Bulgarian nationalism, Greek nationalism, have those nationalisms associate with liberal values, to institutionalize democracy, decentralization, de-evolution of power from the central government. And it's a challenge because, for a number of reasons, because also we have globalization. And globalization means me, me, and foreign professor, an American, coming to teach in Korea. Migration of labor, not just college professors, obviously, business people, students, migrant workers, even in Korea, 1% of the population in South Korea is not Korean, is moving to Korea to work, to teach, to get married. But the story I heard several years ago was South Korean farmers were having difficulty finding wives because Korean women did not want to stay in the village. So they were bringing in wives from Malaysia and Vietnam. Yeah. So, and this causes a reaction among some, not all, but some elements of American society, French society, Hungarian society, Italian society, rejecting globalization and the increasing diversity of these societies, with more and more non-Italian people coming to live in Italy and acting in different ways and behaving in different ways. Many often are refugees who have no money, have no jobs. I was in Italy several years ago. I have family, you know, in Rome that I was going to see regularly. And I would go to the central train station in downtown Rome, Romano Termini, central train station, because that's where the buses all go. So you go from my aunt's house in Tufelo, and you go from Tufelo down to Roma Termini, and then you get on another bus to go to, say, St. Peter's to go see the Pope in the Vatican. Bus number 64, by the way. If you go to Rome, you take bus number 64 from Roma Termini to the Vatican, right? And you would see these refugees who have no jobs, Africans, just laying around at the train station. They have no jobs, they're refugees, they're just sleeping, laying there. And if you're a typical Roman, you might not like that. Who are these people? You might be afraid of them. They don't look like me. They act differently. I saw some ugly things happen while I was just going through Roma Termini train station bus terminal. I remember I got on one bus to go back home to my aunt's house in Tufelo neighborhood, and an African got on, an African man, a black man got on, and he started yelling at a woman, an Italian woman in the bus. He was saying, "You think I'm ugly, don't you? I'm ugly, brutto, brutto." Because she must have done something like, went, ugly African. And he would, "Oh, mio brutto, ah." I mean, unpleasant things, right? That's one side of globalization. I used to go jogging, you know, in the morning. When I would get up in the morning before going into Rome at my aunt's house and apartment in Tufelo, and I would go jogging. And every morning I would go jogging, and the old Italian retired men in this working class neighborhood in Rome, working class retired men, would be sitting out in front of the cafe, drinking their coffee and talking to each other. And they'd be sitting here around a coffee table, and right here would be a black man from Africa, just standing here, begging for money. So you're four old Italian men drinking coffee there, and this young black man is standing there. You say, "I don't like this. I don't like this. This guy making me feel uncomfortable, trying to get money from people, begging for money." And now, remember, there are 60 million refugees in the world. 60 million people have moved from outside of their country, outside of Syria, leaving Afghanistan, leaving Iraq, leaving African countries to go to other countries because of economic and political hardship. That man standing there, obviously, he's in a desperate situation. Nobody likes to leave their family, to leave their parents and brothers and sisters, unless they are desperate. Unless the situation is horrible where they live. No money for food, nothing. They are forced to leave. But these old Italian men who do not study at Catholic University in Korea, do not speak English, do not take Professor Ben, do not study globalization, they just know, I have always been sitting in this cafe, and now every morning this black guy stands there and intimidates us, wanting money from us. What's going on here? And so repeat that story thousands and thousands of times in Italy, in France, in Germany, in Greece, and you begin to understand how the authoritarian populists, the far-right nationalist parties, Golden Dawn, the League Party in Italy, the Alternative for Germany Party, how they get their political support from this kind of situation repeated thousands of times. And we professors and we business people who make big money living in our nice apartments far away, we don't see these people, or not very much. We don't go to Roma Termini on the bus. We drive a car, right? We don't take public transportation. We have our own SUVs. We don't sit at a cafe outside with old retired men. So class issues, right, become a factor here. Yes, we can talk about globalization being good for the world and good for human rights, but those 4 Italian men sitting there with working class educations who do not speak English, they are more likely to react and feel a negative reaction to the presence of these poor immigrants in their society, because they deal with them. They see them every day. And they might even live next door to them. Okay, so let me make sure I go to the notes, because, you know, I talk and talk and talk about the what's going on in Europe, and then I somehow am always concerned that we are not going to discuss the notes sufficiently. So, and this is inevitable. Globalization, interdependence, you cannot stop it. We are all seeing what was always true with the COVID-19 pandemic. We are dependent upon each other for our well-being. What is going on in India right now with the coronavirus, or in Africa and Brazil, has impact on you and me. It has an obvious impact, because as the virus circulates and mutates and changes in Brazil and India, it will come back to us. Sooner or later, it will come here. It's always been true that my well-being depends upon your well-being. But now, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we can all see it. We can all see this fact. So, this is one important reason for understanding how the European Union is a means by which to manage the consequences of unavoidable, inevitable interdependence. We've always been interdependent, even if we do not know it, even if we're not smart enough or educated enough to know that 100 years ago, 1921, we punished Germany for World War I. We are the French. We will make the Germans pay reparations for World War I. They will pay for the damage and the destruction for World War I in the Treaty of Versailles, ending World War I. And we helped make an economic disaster in France. An economic disaster in Germany, because they have to pay reparations for the war costs for World War I. This leads to inflation, hyperinflation in Germany. And the Great Depression comes later, and it elects Germany as Hitler as a result. Hitler would not have come to power in Germany without the world economic crisis of the 1920s and 30s, which the French and the Allies that won the First World War, contributed to causing by the Treaty of Versailles, punishing Germany, demanding that Germany spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in costs for the war. And what happened? Hitler was elected and conquered France. all right? So we have become more and more aware of interdependence. It's just the COVID-19 pandemic has made massive numbers of people aware of what has always been true. And some people react negative to this. They deny it. We talk about COVID denial. No, 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 no. They are so unsettled and made so unhappy and afraid of interdependence. They deny that COVID-19 is real. There was reports this morning on the news in Britain, in London, protests, thousands of people attacking the police in London, demanding the end to social distancing and wearing masks in public, denying that COVID-19 pandemic is real. It's a hoax, they say. Those are the nationalists. Those are the intense British nationalists. Those people tended to support Brexit. The Brexit vote to leave the European Union 5 years ago. That's one reaction. Those are all reactions of Homo sapiens to complex interdependency. No! Human beings tend to see reality, COVID denial, in a way that allows them to feel good about what they want. I'm a British nationalist. I don't care about the rest of the effing world. I don't have to care. I don't need to care. And so COVID-19 is a hoax. It's not real. I told you that's motivated reasoning. It's called motivated reasoning in the literature. So this is the context for understanding Europeanization in these chapters, which we summarize the findings about Europeanization to manage obvious interdependency in Europe among all of Europe. But remember, we talked about previous class, European Union is an elite-driven project, right? This is the mass of the population in Europe. The enthusiasts, the drivers, are the elite of Europe. And they're the top 5% of the population, right? These people are driving Europeanization. These people down here, they don't even read a newspaper. These are the ones that are angry and outraged about masks and social distancing. They don't read newspapers. They do not know details. They don't study these issues and think about them all day like you and me. No, they're the regular common people. Their well-being is interdependent with everyone else in Europe too, whether it be Germany, France, Italy. They're all interdependent. These people do not understand it. These understand it more. And they are driving Europeanization. You understand? And so, but of course, in elections, these people all have votes. And they vote for Brexit. They vote for, well, we'll see if they vote for Marine Le Pen next year. Enough of them do to make her president of France. So you always get a sense when reading these chapters and the notes in these chapters that this is a study of how the elites of Europe are reacting to regulate interdependency in a liberal democratic way, understanding that they know these people here, these people are nationalistic, and they vote in elections. They vote for Boris Johnson and Donald Trump and Law and Justice Party in Poland and Fidesz and Viktor Orban in Hungary. And they try to associate this nationalism of the mass public with liberal values, with liberalism. And that means coordinating, collaborating, and cooperating and institutionalizing that coordination, collaboration, and cooperation across Europe. And this chapter is all about that institutionalization of the 3 C's: collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. Or in short terms, European integration. European integration. So neo-functionalist methods means the leadership, the elite of these countries taking leadership in this process. It's a political process of integration driven by the elites, right? And of course, the experience of these countries has been very powerful and obviously shaping the general tendencies of those countries towards supporting neo-functional steering, like steering a car, steering of the European Union. And, they make that point in the chapter, right? I mean, that the Nazi experience in Germany, not coincidentally, has made the German elite and the German state most supportive of European integration. Remember, the British won World War II and World War I. They haven't been humiliated. The elite has not been humiliated in Britain the way the elite was humiliated in Italy and France and Germany. You can say the French won World War II, but they really didn't. I mean, their army was defeated so quickly at the beginning of World War II. It was a joke. They didn't even try to fight, basically. France became a weak power as a result. Everyone knew France was done as a great power with the defeat of Germany in World War II. But France within the European Union would reinvigorate and rebuild French influence and prestige in the world through European integration. So it was a political strategy for this elite to create a new era of peace between France and Germany. The specific consequence of that decision was to integrate West Germany and Germany with Europeanization. But as we saw, with the end of the Cold War and the end of the Soviet Union, that Germany has been a little more willing to be controversial in bargaining and debating and arguing with its European allies under Gerhard Schroeder and now under Angela Merkel. But still, again, you see in the coronavirus pandemic that Germany continues to play a leading role in making Europe work. France has been more schizophrenic. Schizophrenic means having 2 personalities, being very pro-Europe and then being very afraid of European integration and Germany. And in the early years, France was a strong supporter of European integration. The Schuman Plan under Foreign Minister Robert Schuman was a French initiative to create the European coal and steel community. And then the French leadership, the elite, pushed for the European defense community in 1954 to integrate the West German and French armies. Brilliant idea, right? Brilliant idea from among this elite. And then, of course, the French National Assembly, the parliament, has to vote on whether or not to approve the European defense community, and they represent these people. And what do they say? No! Are you crazy? You can't integrate the German army with the French army? So France has adopted this approach of more integration in the context of Franco-German relationship, and then leading to the Maastricht Treaty, creating the European Union. And that established the preference for European monetary integration. They made a commitment to economic and monetary union in the Maastricht Treaty. Wow, it's already 30 years ago, older than you. And that has been the commitment, right, among the French leadership. The French leadership, they know that their people are nationalistic. So they want to promote the vested interests of business and government and administration in European integration to make European integration the path always to go forward. So that French nationalism always associates or will tend to be most strongly associated with liberal values because of the institutions that have been created since the 1951 European coal and steel community that have built up and expanded and grown, and millions of people have invested their careers and their money in European integration. But keep in mind, every so often they get a shock. The French people reject the draft European Union Constitution Treaty in 2005. Remember, we're still here, the nationalists. We're still here. Don't forget about us. So the French leadership under, as recently as Emmanuel Macron, president now of France, they have intensely always advocated more European integration. Under Macron, after he became elected, he really pushed the French government, the French administration, to support even more European integration. And we'll see if it continues to control the Rally for the Republic, National Front, Marine Le Pen. As I said, she continually says today, now, I am not going to take France out of the European Union or the Eurozone. She says that because she wants to win the election for president next year. Okay, we already mentioned how the French National Assembly rejected the European Defense Community Initiative in 1954. French President Charles de Gaulle resisted neo-functionalism and supranationalism in the 1960s. He did not support moving for more political integration, and he stalled European political integration because he wanted Europe to be a close alliance of member states led by France. And he saw the European Union as a way to rebuild the pride and dignity of France after, of course, we already mentioned the humiliation of World War II, and then another humiliation. France loses its empire in Vietnam in 1954. And then Algeria. Oh my gosh, Algeria. Here is the Fourth Republic that existed from 46 to 58. And it ended when Charles de Gaulle became president in 1958 because he was such a powerful living symbol of French nationalism that he had the authority to control the French army, the French generals, the French people, to organize them and to agree to leave Algeria after, well, the Algerians claim 1 million Algerians were slaughtered in that war in Algeria, fighting the French occupiers who had been there since the 1830s. I mean, can you imagine that? We're talking horrible World War II type violence. Charles de Gaulle was able, with his prestige and power, I was leader of the Free French, you, French general, must agree and accept that we must leave Algeria. It is no longer part of France. And Again, this has a connection to nationalism and Marine Le Pen and the Rally for the Republic or the National Front today. Marine Le Pen's father was Jean-Marie Le Pen. I showed you the YouTube video. He was a French paratrooper, a French elite soldier who fought in the Algerian War. The French paratroopers, they were the elite. So again, this connection to humiliation, nationalism, episodes in the past that we should not have lost in Algeria. Algeria was part of France. You saw that with Donald Trump on January 6th. Protesters, rioters waving the South Vietnam flag. We were humiliated, but we were fighting for the right cause, and Donald Trump will make America great again. Similar patterns. You see it in France, you see it in the United States. Fascinating. Homo sapiens, nationalists. Yeah, you see it. See, it was part of, technically Algeria was technically part of France. Algeria actually had representatives, deputies in the French Parliament in Paris. It was considered to be part of France, like Corsica. So the French also in their favoring European Union, but at times becoming a little too nervous about European integration, overwhelming French identity, the French authorities insisted that the Europeans' common foreign and security policy remain intergovernmental. The European Union can adopt a foreign policy, but it can only adopt a foreign policy if no country opposes it, right? So they have to ask themselves, we have a coup d'etat in Chad, the country of Chad. Is Europe going to take a position on that coup of the military in the country of Chad? And if one of the 27 member states says, I think we should stay out of that, then there is no common foreign and security policy of the European Union on Chad regarding the coup. So that's the meaning of intergovernmental. They do not use the ordinary method in which the Commission makes a proposal, the European Parliament votes on it, the Council of Ministers of the European votes by majority vote to adopt a policy. No, that's for economic policy, that's for business policy, but not for foreign policy. It's still intergovernmental. All of the countries at least have to acquiesce or accept a position to be able to say the European Union has a foreign policy on that position. They do not do it the way they do it in the ordinary procedure. And that's at the insistence of France, supposedly. I think probably other countries also wanted it that way. And we already mentioned how French voters rejected the 2005 constitutional treaty. The Great Britain, the United Kingdom, has been less schizophrenic in its approach to EU and its successive governments. It's always favored intergovernmental approach to European collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. It always supported economic integration, but when European Union moved towards political integration, you saw more hostility that led to Brexit. The United Kingdom's always aimed to protect its national interests while preserving national sovereignty. Again, that's not like the Germans, right? And it ultimately culminated in the United Kingdom leaving the European Union altogether. This statement in the European Union treaties of a commitment to creating an ever closer union was not a strong point that appealed to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom never really supported that, including that commitment to creating what sounds like a United States of Europe. A United States of Europe. And so you saw it contributed to intensifying divisions within the Conservative Party after the Maastricht Treaty. And of course, that escalated, that trend in nationalism intensified, leading to Cameron's gamble on the referendum. And we know how that happened, what that led to. And for many people, it was a surprise, but maybe it should not have been. The British nationalists could not tolerate the supremacy of the European Court of Justice or the Court of Justice of the European Union over the British courts. And the United Kingdom always wanted control over migration, partly because Great Britain has been the strongest economy in Britain. Great Britain has been the strongest economy, national economy within the European Union. And many of those migrants are coming from countries that had been part of the British Empire, India, Pakistan, Iraq, and of course, many people speak English, and the place where they're going to go to find a job is Northern Europe, including Britain. There are not many jobs in Italy. I told you about the story of the people begging for money in Rome because they couldn't find jobs. So in the UK, France, and Germany, the three strongest countries, biggest powers in the European Union, and in all of the member states, we can identify issues in relation to integration that are red lines. In other words, the states will defend its national interest. That's the statement about nationalism, right? And it changes. As we said, Germany is not, as collectively speaking, nationalistic as Britain is, but that can change. Poland and Spain have used the European Union to promote their demands to be recognized as major European countries, major European powers, and they should have voting weights in the Council of European Union, the Council of Ministers, in the ordinary procedure that are big, so that they can say, we are one of the major actors in Europe, up there with Italy and France and Germany. Ireland, little Ireland, has consistently demanded that in European Union negotiations, that the European Union stop attacking it for its low corporation taxation rates. So lots of American companies and other companies have set up subsidiaries in Ireland so that they can claim that their profits come from Ireland, so that their profits are not taxed in other countries because Ireland has a low tax rate. So Apple, for example, Apple, the huge computer company in the United States, they set up a subsidiary in Ireland using Ireland's laws that establish low corporation taxation rates because the Irish have very low taxes on corporate profits. And that means, of course, the United States government is not able to tax Apple to get money for the government from Apple because Apple claims, oh, well, we're not an American. Those profits, they came from our Irish subsidiary, which is complete. It's not true. There's only 4.5 million people live in the Republic of Ireland. 4.5 million. It's about the size of Bhutan. How can their European profits come from Ireland? So there's lots of discussion about that today, right now, about the countries of European Union, United States, South Korea, coming together in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development to establish a single low minimum corporate taxation rate that all corporations have to pay and not go to places like Ireland in order to avoid paying taxes. And it thereby aims to attract corporate investment in the Republic of Ireland, and it has done that. And it's continually refused to submit to demands from Brussels and London and Paris to change its taxation rate. And the other countries of the European Union acquiesce. Germany has always insisted on sound money and fiscal responsibility. In other words, that the other countries in the European Union must limit their debt. Because, of course, Germany, under monetary policy, underwrites or supports, makes the euro possible. So you see all of these cases, how these countries are using the European Union and negotiating within the European Union to defend what they consider to be their core national interests and defend them. Ireland must keep its taxation rate. And they get emotional about this. Again, we talk about nationalism and emotion. What did the Irish defenders of Ireland's ridiculously low corporate taxation rates, an easy way by which Apple and other companies, huge corporations, can exploit Irish law? What do the Irish say? The Irish say, you know why there are only 4.5 million people in Ireland? Because we were abused by the British. You British abused us when we were part of the British Empire. And the people of Ireland left Ireland when we had a famine in the 19th century, in the 1840s, the Irish potato famine, when Irish people starved to death by the thousands and thousands because of potato failure, potato crop, died because of disease, and the Irish farmers overwhelmingly grew potatoes. And we were part of the British Empire. And what did London do as the Irish people? The Catholics of Ireland, because of course, you know, the British broke from the Pope under Henry VIII, and being opposed to Catholic religion became part of British nationalism under Elizabeth and later rulers in Britain. Who is British? Somebody who's not Catholic. And in the 19th century, the Irish Catholics were dying. And what did London do? Nothing. They let them die. Eventually, they got around to helping them. You know, it's like, and by then, it was too late. And they went to, Irish people left and went to Canada, went to the United States, went to Australia, so they could eat, not die. That's why there's only 4.5 million people in Ireland today. That's what they say to defend this low corporate taxation rate. They appeal to Irish nationalism, Irish grievance, Irish resentment. We are compensating for the abuse we suffered from Britain. Even economic policy. I mean, you Koreans understand that, right? One thing that I think all South Koreans are proud of is the economic miracle on the Han River. The economic miracle of South Korea. It makes Koreans feel proud. I even see it in the United States. I talk to people in the United States who are working class people, and they think that Koreans are extra smart. They know about the economic miracle in South Korea. They know about Samsung. So economic policy can become a symbolic source of nationalism and national pride. And that's true in Asia, and it's true in Europe, of course. Yeah, so, and Cyprus promotes its interests regarding the northern occupation of Cyprus by Turkey. Luxembourg defends its savings banks. Luxembourg doesn't look too closely at people depositing money and putting money in Luxembourg banks. That has been one way by which Luxembourg has become very prosperous. But there's pressure to address that because lots of that money probably has some unpleasant hidden background that the Luxembourg banks hide by money laundering, right? Switzerland has been doing that for many, many years too. Spain acts in the EU to oppose EU policies that would encourage regional secessionists with Spain. And for example, you see today, Spain has never recognized Kosovo as an independent country that broke away from Serbia over 20 years ago. Spain has not recognized Kosovo as an independent country. Unlike United States, unlike other European countries, Spain has not, because Spain is worried about Catalan nationalism, setting an example to encourage Catalan nationalists. Denmark has refused to lower its environmental policy standards because they're higher than the European Union's environmental standards. Hungary refuses to accept any migrant refugees, even though it's been adopted as a policy that each of the member states of the European Union are supposed to accept some of them. Yeah, and you see, again, they say these the authors of the textbook say these national interests can be material, economic, or they can be due to discourse. And I put discourse, that's the term they use. See, that's what I told you. I think the authors of the book, of the chapters, they use terms like discourse and cognitive processes, and these are all references to nationalism. But they don't have a good theory for understanding it. It comes out throughout the whole book. What is this thing? But I think I got a good theory because I had the right professor when I was, in graduate school. And as I told you, that's what I try to do my writing on. I ask you to write papers, and I have to write papers, is applying my theory of nationalism to explaining this. So that's what I do. It's political psychology. And before I forget, your papers are due May 1, right? I think is Saturday morning. And let me go start attendance. Sorry, start attendance. Ready? Okay, your smart attendance number is 121. 121 is your smart attendance number. 121. And somebody please put that in the chat so that it's all there in case somebody comes late. 121. And so assignments, and yeah, your final draft is due Saturday. And yeah, I made a typo. You can use information from chapters 1 through 11. Chapter 11 is the United Kingdom. That's the whole chapter on Britain. So I got a little confused there with jumping ahead to Bulgaria and Poland, and so chapters 1 through 11, and this describes how I'm going to put a grade on the paper. An excellent, outstanding paper is one that does not have any facts incorrect. Like if you say Charles de Gaulle was president of Germany, I can't give you an A, right? That's a factual error. So it has no factual errors. It uses and cite information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 1 through 11, 3 different chapters. You can use and cite information from more than that, but at least 3 from chapters 1 through 11. And you write something interesting, right? There's when I read the paper, I want to go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. That'll get you an A or A+. A B paper is a paper that just summarizes the information well. And cites information from 3 different chapters. And a C paper is a paper that makes big mistakes, like they do not use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters. If you use and cite information from only 2 chapters, the highest grade you can get is C+. Okay, and onward there. So that's the paper assignment. And okay, so we've covered that. Back to the notes. Yeah, so it comes across in the whole book. And they know it's really important. This notions of discourse and cognition and narratives but they don't have a good theory. The authors, there are many authors, right? So I can't speak for all of them, but well, I can speak for all of them. They don't have a theory of nationalism. They know it's important, but they don't know how to conceptualize it. And I present it here in terms of nationalists are more prone to see the world in threats and opportunities to the nation, to stereotype the perceived sources of those threats and opportunities to the nation, and to overestimate the relative power capabilities. That's just the beginning of the political psychology of nationalism, and that means emotion. So British concerns over sovereignty becomes an emotional issue. France's obsession, another term, they're obsessed. Oh, they're crazy, right? Don't want to use terms like obsession, crazy, irrational, because this is all part of human nature. It's just who we are. And if you're a neo-functional strategist of European integration, you've got to know that. And you do know this, right? That if you're a politician, you live and breathe public opinion, and you cannot understand public opinion unless you understand nationalism. You are a professional politician, you win elections. That means you understand public opinion. And so you cannot understand public opinion unless you understand nationalism. And then among this elite in France or Italy or Germany or Britain and so on, typically these elites, they all are Europeans, and they understand what it's like if you're a French politician, that this Portuguese politician is concerned about public opinion in elections like you are. So you empathize with him or her. You understand that they face political constraints and limits, and so you tolerate that, okay, we'll let the Irish keep their corporate low taxation rates. Okay, we will accept that Hungary, for some time, Hungary is refusing to cooperate on migrants and refugees. We know that there's many Polish people are upset about undermining the Catholic Church, which under John Paul, the Pope, John Paul II, was considered to be one of the main opponents of the evil Soviet Union. And now the Catholic Church in Poland doesn't want abortion rights. We understand that. We've elected politicians. And so we compromise. We're liberals. We compromise. We negotiate. We talk. It takes a long time to decide things, but that's what it's like in Europe. The problem is that Europeans, like Americans, can be racists. They understand if you're like Americans do, they understand that if you're a French politician, that German politicians also have to face German public opinion. And German public opinion constrains and limits them, or Portuguese public opinion, or Spanish public opinion. They understand that among themselves, but they don't understand, for example, that Muslims in Iran, Muslim leaders of Muslim countries also have public opinion limits of what they can and cannot do. And if you're Donald Trump or Emmanuel Macron or Angela Merkel in Germany and say, hey, Iran, you can't have nuclear weapons. You can't have nuclear weapons. You can't have the most advanced nuclear technology to make nuclear weapons. Why? Because you're barbaric, you Iranians. You're not civilized enough to have nuclear technology because you're uncivilized. Israel can have nuclear weapons, yeah, because what? They're white Europeans. They can abuse Palestinians, but you Iranians, you're too barbaric. When they think they're as ancient as the Koreans and the Chinese, Their civilization is as old in their thinking as Korea or as China. Goes back thousands of years. And it was the British and the Americans that put that totalitarian, corrupt, cruel dictator, the Shah of Iran, in power in 1953 and tortured and terrorized the Iranian people. Because a Democrat, Mossadegh, was not cracking down on the Iranian Communist Party, the Americans and the British overthrew a democratic government, a liberal democratic government, and replaced them with the Shah of Iran, who instituted terror, secret police, killed and tortured thousands and thousands of people. And now we're telling the Iranians, you're too barbaric. You're not civilized enough to have nuclear technology. So they understand each other about nationalism, but they have a weakness about understanding the power of nationalism in Afghanistan, in Iran, in their former empire. You see the French are fighting in Chad right now. French military is fighting against the Islamists in Chad. But among the Europeans, they tend to understand that other European politicians face public opinion limits on what they can and cannot do. So the European Union is a governance focus, and that's evident in the country chapters. They go beyond talking in those chapters about the impact of the European Union on national government structures and institutions and government policy. They also talk about the impact of European Union on the judicial systems, the courts of France, the courts of Germany, the courts, legal systems of these countries, as well as the impact of Europeanization on the parliament and on the parliaments of their countries through the parliamentary committees that have been created to monitor what the central government is doing. But one of the themes in the book, throughout the book, is that the European Union has, and Europeanization and European integration has strengthened the power of the central executive authority in the national government in the member states. It has strengthened the prime minister or president in France or in Czech Republic or in Bulgaria. The parliament is not a very effective actor in Europeanization in the national parliaments of the member states because the parliament doesn't have enough information. The negotiations happen in Brussels among the representatives of the national governments, not among the national parliaments. And for another reason also, that the members of the parliaments of Bulgaria, Germany, France, they think about and winning elections in their countries, and these people typically are not so concerned about European Union policies. They might have some concern about the farm policy if you're a Polish farmer or a Bulgarian farmer or a Greek farmer, but these people do not think very much about Europe because Europe focuses upon business interests and regulations to regulate the production of smartphones and regulating finance. Concerns among these people, the more elite sections of society, but small section of society. And if you're a member of the parliament in Germany or Bulgaria or France, you focus on those policy issues that these people care about. And European Union issues are not something that will typically win you elections in your national government. So since the Lisbon Treaty 12 years ago, the European Union has been trying to increase the voice of the national parliaments in the European Union policymaking process, and it's making some effort, some progress. For example, the parliaments of all of the member states have the right to scrutinize and examine draft European Union legislation that is being considered under the ordinary procedure that I mentioned earlier today, right? So, and the national parliaments have the right to give their opinion on legislation working its way through the European Union policymaking process. But even so, the fact remains that these people typically do not vote on European Union policies. They are more and more. They're becoming more and more Eurosceptic. Eurosceptic parties have emerged and become very powerful. So European Union has become more and more important. And so, yeah, maybe we will see the national parliaments become more and more important actors shaping European integration as the French voters and more German voters and Italian voters become more and more nervous and see a threat from European integration. So it is changing, but until the 1990s, the parliaments played a very minor role in the member states in European integration. It's a top-down, top-level, executive branch focused process. And maybe it's good that the parliaments are going to play a more active role because that will provide more opportunities for Europe to become more important in the thinking of more and more of the mass population. But the reaction can also be Euroscepticism. Also, subnational governments becoming more and more important. Remember, the European Union is a peace strategy. So wars in Europe in the 20th century were fought between nation states. So making people feel less focused on, I'm a German, I'm a German, I'm a German, I'm a German, to think that I'm not only a German, I'm also a Bavarian, and I'm also a Municher. I'm a citizen of the city of Munich. And I'm also a citizen of Europe. And being a citizen of Bavaria is important because look at all the European Union policies that help Bavarian students and Bavarian farmers. And look at the European Union giving money to the city of Munich to have a Munich City of Culture year for the city of Munich, the capital of Bavaria. And so, yes, I'm proud to be a Munich citizen and Bavarian and German and European and worldwide because the European Union is working to save the world from global climate change. You're trying to get people focused away from Berlin, Berlin, Berlin. Berlin is everything. Berlin. Paris is everything. Paris, Paris, Paris. Sofia, Sofia, Sofia in Bulgaria, right? I mean, that was the way I interpreted Bulgaria when I was there. Bulgarians' focus of when they had a problem or a need, look to the national government. Sofia, Sofia, the capital. It's like it here in South Korea. What's the second most powerful, important political office in South Korea? Mayor of Seoul. Who gets elected mayor of Seoul? They're going to become probably president of South Korea. Same in Bulgaria. Second most powerful, important office in Bulgaria is mayor of Sofia. Boyko Borisov, the current prime minister of Bulgaria, he was mayor of Sofia before he became prime minister of Bulgaria. And this is not good if you're trying to weaken the role or lessen the role of nationalism and the nation state and the institutions of the nation state, including the German Wehrmacht or the French army or the Bulgarian army, to get people to think about themselves as citizens of their cities, of their neighborhoods, of their regions, of their cultural groups, of their many different identities that we have, and not so much just your national identity as represented by the state in the form of the national government. Remember, the European Union is supposed to be a peace strategy. That's why it won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. But again, I'm talking as a member of the elite. You know, most people don't think about European Union the way we do here in this class. They don't think about it at all. but they still vote in elections. So public opinion and political parties are also a focus. Europeanization, for example, it's used in different ways. Europeanization is viewed in Bulgarian public opinion as a way by which to root out corruption. Again, Bulgaria is supposedly the most corrupt member of the European Union and the poorest. And there's a connection there, right? Although Greece is not far behind. The impact of the European Union as Europeanization is not only then about vertical boundaries between the EU and member states, but also horizontal. In other words, as I said, encouraging people's identities as members of other communities, smaller communities, local communities, cooperating with each other across the boundaries of the local communities. So city of Munich cooperating with the city of Milan in Italy, and increasing those kinds of horizontal connections. European integration has increased the role of regional governments, particularly, well, in all of the areas of the European Union. In Bulgaria and in Poland under communism, those communist states did not have significant regional government authorities. They were all had government regional provinces, but they were one-party totalitarian dictatorships, right? So after communism fell, these countries all modified and changed their constitutions to create regional governments that, according to the paper on the Constitution, have real power and authority. And the conclusion of the book, of the writers of your textbook, is that all of these countries, including the former communist countries, this has had a major impact, that regional government is important and has become a significant player even in countries that did not have this tradition, like Bulgaria and Poland. Sometimes this is a problem because the history of some of these countries, like Spain, as I told you, Franco, the fascist dictator in the Civil War, the brutal Civil War, his main enemies included Spanish Catalonian nationalism and Basque nationalism. So with the European Union emphasizing regional governments, giving regional governments genuine power, this makes Spanish officials nervous, and perhaps rightly so. We saw how Catalonia, 3 years ago, organized an illegal referendum on whether or not to leave Spain. And the leaders of the Catalonian regional parliament declared through a vote that they were leaving Spain. And the Spanish central government sent the military and the police to take control over Catalonia, and the leaders of the secessionist effort in the Catalonian parliament fled. Some were arrested and are now in jail. One, Puigdemont, went to Germany and Belgium and was elected a member of the European Parliament for Catalonia, while he was outside of Catalonia in Belgium by the Catalan nationalists, elected him to the European Parliament. And as we covered last month, the European Parliament voted to remove his immunity from prosecution, so that he can be sent back to Spain and be put on trial in Spain for illegal political activity. So the European Union is very aware that they do not want to destabilize their member states. So they're not helping Carlos Puigdemont. But if you're a nationalist, remember, like I said, nationalists tend to overestimate their power capabilities. If you're a Catalan nationalist, you desperately want to believe that your dream of Catalonia being an independent country, you say it's small? There's lots of small countries in the European Union. There's 3 or 4 million people living in Lithuania, 2 or 3 million people living in Estonia, 2 or 3 million living in Latvia. Czech Republic has 10 million people. Slovakia has, I can't tell. These are all about the same size as Catalonia. Why shouldn't Catalonia be an independent country? Look at all the other small independent countries in Europe. And if you're a peace strategist for the European Union, this makes you very nervous because you don't want to anger the Spanish nationalists, the Franco sympathizers. The Popular Party in Spain is the descendant of the Francoist movement in Spain. So it's a delicate, delicate balancing. Yeah, so Catalonia and the Basque Country have typically led these efforts, and so even though there have been efforts to strengthen and create regional governments, they do not automatically result in being very effective, but they have moved to create. This is in this chapter. I'm going through the chapter 17 now, and chapter 17 says it has been significant in Eastern and Central Europe. So there's some dispute here. But even when I was in Bulgaria, right, the Bulgarians were always telling me, yeah, European Union doesn't want Bulgarians to focus all of their attention on Sofia. So 3 assumptions coming from the pre-Europeanization literature are highlighted here. The EU strengthens the member state. That is a standard view about European integration. And so it conforms with liberal intergovernmentalism. That's the dominant theory for understanding European integration, that this is a project led by national governments who are led by liberal elected professional politicians using the European Union to pursue their national interests as they define them within a democratic and capitalist framework, which means cooperation, but still pursuing the national interest of France, Germany, Italy, Cyprus, Ireland. However, we see, executives did strengthen in regard to their respective parliaments, but we also have seen regional governments becoming more influential within the European framework. And this has strengthened a new multi-level process of governance and politics in the European Union. There is simultaneous ongoing processes at the regional, national, and European level, all being used simultaneously at the same time for different political and government actors to pursue their objectives defined by their responsibilities. And that has transformed, governance has been transformed among the European Union member states for that regard. That if you're a governor of a Bulgarian state, a Bulgarian province, you are going to be very much aware of what the money that the European Union can make available to you to develop your underdeveloped backward region. And you're going to be communicating with Brussels, with the agencies, and you're going to be communicating with Bulgarian members of the European Parliament, as well as with the Bulgarian national government, because the Bulgarian national government obviously plays a very important role in the economic development of Bulgaria. And you're going to be communicating with Bulgarian business people and Bulgarian companies that are active in Bulgaria, but also with European corporations that are interested in investing in Bulgaria and making a factory in your poor region to give jobs to your people. And you're going to, that company might be headquartered in another city in Berlin or Paris or Brussels. And you're going to be concerned about economic policy. So you see, if you're a local mayor or a regional governor or a national government, you are thinking about all different levels of activity and communication to achieve your objectives that are defined by making your constituents satisfied with your performance. And so you want to utilize all the resources that are available to you, including, for example, the cohesion economic development policies that have been very, very important in the poor former communist countries. And so, so the European Union and Europeanization have transformed member state governance. The European Union has made international relations and domestic politics all interrelated to create this new word, intermestic. International, domestic, put them together, intermestic. So the EU is more intermestic in character, so diplomats and foreign affairs departments are not the only actors that are engaged in making European Union policy. But yeah, keep that in mind. Until the 1990s, it was the foreign ministers, right? The most powerful council of the European Union was the foreign ministers meeting. The foreign ministers of Italy and France and Germany and Portugal and Spain would get together, and they were the most important actors in the European Economic Community governance process. Since then, with European Monetary Union, since the Maastricht Treaty, with the closer integration of more and more policy areas, we see finance ministers playing an equally or more important role. For example, in the Eurozone. Of course, the finance ministers of Bulgaria, well, not Bulgaria, they're not in the European Eurozone yet, but they would like to be, right? Greece, Germany, those ministers are playing a more and more important role, maybe more important than the foreign ministers. The meeting of the foreign ministers was called the General Affairs Council. That was the official name of the Council of Europe meeting, Council of European Union meeting of the foreign ministers, the General Affairs Council. So you have different actors within the government bureaucracies in Spain and Germany and France that have to manage the bureaucratic boundaries that are becoming more and more blurred and indefinite between all of the different sectors of the government in making European policy. Domestic policy is European policy. European policy is domestic policy. It's not just an international relations focus. And so the central governments of the national governments of the member states have created new offices, new bureaucracies to try to coordinate the information and activity of these different agencies and actors. You know, keep in mind, we're all humans here. We have careers. We want to get a good job. We want to join a bureaucracy. We want to join a government agency. And, you know, any government agency, a person working within it, they have too much to do if this is a good government. There's too much work to do, and you've got to get your job done that was assigned to you by your boss. And your boss evaluates you in your job, and so you want your boss to be happy. And if you're in the agricultural ministry of your country, you're going to focus on your specific policy question or focus. It's your area of responsibility. And it's very defined and limited. How that relates to, for example, regional development policy in your country, in Bulgaria or Greece or whatever, it's a very important question. But that's not your job. You are working in the agricultural ministry. So who's going to make sure that your efforts in the agricultural ministry don't conflict or work most effectively with the policies and activity in the economic development ministry that's trying to develop Bulgaria or Greece. And you already have too much work to do. So trying to get you to change the way you act, change the way you behave, that's very difficult because you've got to get this project done by a certain deadline, and you are overworked, you don't have enough time, and so trying to change bureaucracies is very difficult. You will find out when you start your careers what it's like to work in a bureaucracy and to change that bureaucracy, to adapt it. And this is what the European Union is confronting. You've got these vast government bureaucracies, corporate bureaucracies, all filled with people like you and me, individuals with career ambitions, hopes, dreams, concerned about making our bosses happy, getting our deadlines done, meeting our tasks before then we go on to the next task, and not having enough time, not having enough information, and now we're supposed to Europeanize. Hey, you might say, I'm just a civil servant or an employee who's doing my job. My job is not to think about how do I Europeanize my department, my office. But somebody has to, and somebody has to have a plan and a strategy. And of course, that's why another reason that Europeanization and European integration has made the central government, the prime minister and the president, more and more powerful, because they are the ones that are supposed to coordinate the activities of all of these agencies. And you get that sense from reading the book. The book is very focused on describing, for example, how the Spanish administration changed to create new offices under the different prime ministers, to bring in this section from this organization and this office from this organization, and put it here and then move it over there with a new prime minister, and then the next prime minister moves it over here. But that's the world of reality. That's the world of the bureaucrat. That's the world of the professional. You want to talk about nationalism and political psychology and stereotyping, become a college professor. You want to think big thoughts about grand strategy and hegemony, become a college professor. But most people don't have this luxury, right? They've got a job to do, they're under stress, and they want to keep their bosses happy, and their job is focused in a very specific area. And that is true for millions of people. And so, yes, it's produced a reinforcement of the presidentialization of domestic politics. That prime ministers, like the prime minister when I was your age, the standard view was that the prime minister of Britain was just the first among equals. The prime minister was not a president of Britain. The prime minister was not the president of the United Kingdom. The prime minister was the first most powerful politician among a group of politicians in their party. But then Margaret Thatcher became prime minister, and she changed that. And the prime minister of Britain has become more like a president, like the South Korean president. I mean, or the prime minister of Italy has become more and more powerful to become like the French president. The French president is the example of the presidentialization of domestic politics. Italy has a president, but the president is more like an elected king. The German government has an elected president, but it's also a symbolic authority. The executive branch, in the form of whoever's the most powerful official in the government, in the executive branch, they become even more powerful because of European integration, which is ironic, right? It's ironic. I learned the hard way that I have to shut down Zoom in about 6 minutes so that I have time to record it and transfer it. So we need to go to an exercise so that I can So polling, is this polling here? Where's polls? This one? Oh, this one. Okay, so what's the questions that I have here? And so, okay, so here, please respond to the following statement. The liberal nationalism of the European nation state is a necessary driver of European integration. Could European integration happen without European nationalism associating with liberal values? Remember, we talked about how typically nationalism associates with liberal values. Do you need nationalism to make European integration happen? That if we want Germany, France, Italy to be strong and prosperous, we have to appeal to your pride in being Italian or German or French, particularly French, to make European integration happen? Even if nationalism is a problem, there's a paradox. We must exploit nationalism to make this integration happen. And this is important for comparing European Union with ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN states, with the exception of Vietnam, maybe Myanmar, Myanmar is not a nation state, but Vietnam might be a nation state in a way, for example, more like Italy and France and Germany are nation states. But Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, these are multi-ethnic states whose borders were created by the Spanish and the French and the Americans and the Dutch and the Indonesian and the British, right? And they have within them many different ethnic groups. India is an example. So ASEAN integration is going to be different from European Union integration because European Union is built upon nation states that were created before 1951. But they're there. And if you're going to integrate Europe as part of a peace strategy to avoid Mussolini's and Hitler's coming to power in the future, you still need to appeal to these people who are nationalists or nationalistically predisposed. So how do you respond to this? Do you think that the liberal nationalism of the European nation state is a necessary driver of European integration? So click here. So can you please vote? And we'll just 30 seconds. So I see 5 people in class. I don't know if anybody's watching online. Maybe that's it then. Okay. So click here. And here or here? Here? Okay, so yeah, you agree. And I think I'm sympathetic to that also, that people, the mass of the public, maybe it's changing over the years, but the mass public is still motivated and can be driven and motivated in political behavior by nationalistic appeals. And so we want French people to be excited about being French within Europe. Italian people to be excited about being Italians within Europe. German people to be excited about being Germans within Europe. Bulgarian people to be excited about being Bulgarian within Europe. Polish people to be excited about being Polish within Europe. And maybe over time, over years and decades, as people move to find work in other countries, intermarry with other people that are not from their national backgrounds, people become less and less national in identity overall. That will change. But in the meantime, we need to appeal to people's pride in their nations, because somebody will. If I don't, some other political entrepreneur, some other political ambitious leader will appeal. Donald Trump's, Marine Le Pen's, those people are everywhere. They're always present. The question is, how do we keep them from getting more public opinion support? How do we create conditions that people like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini always are on the margin, are always on the fringe, are not taken seriously? Hitler was a joke. Hitler was considered a joke in Germany after World War I. He was a clown. That was the prevailing view. His beer hall push, first attempt to carry out a coup in the 1920s, it was considered to be a ridiculous event, like Donald Trump's insurrection on January 6th. And then, several years later, he becomes prime minister. We have to make sure those conditions never emerge again. And that means we cannot engage in zero-sum competition. We have to engage not in win-lose competition, we have to engage in win-win interaction. Our interaction must be win-win. And that means liberalism. That means coordination, cooperation, compromise. And this one? This one? Okay. And I have a, so I want to go to a different one here. Oh. Thank you. And I have another quiz here. I wanted to cover another exciting topic. Since I think so many people are excited about sports, you know, I don't know if you follow European sports. There was a report in the newspaper. It's a long report from a couple days ago in the New York Times about how the leaders of the richest, most famous, famous European football clubs attempted to create a European Super League. And it was the 6 British English clubs that were the driver behind this effort to create a separate European football soccer league involving the most famous clubs in Europe. And it's not a coincidence. I think it was the 6 British league teams that attempted to do this. And of course, the owners of these companies, the Manchester United chairman, Joe Glazer, whose family also owns the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, United States football. Chelsea's Russian billionaire, Roman Abramovich. Arsenal, Stan Kroenke, who controls nearly a dozen professional teams, almost never speak publicly. Manchester City's owner, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a member of the royal family of Abu Dhabi, doesn't speak to reporters at all. And others considered for the role, like Liverpool's majority owner, John F. Henry, were unwilling to accept it. But the point is that these owners of these European super teams thought they could make even more money and make the sport more popular by globalizing it even further, by separating these super teams from the rest of the national teams in England, in Italy, in Germany, in France. And the the public fans rose up in fury and outrage, led by the current leaders of the European professional sports organizations, who of course want to maintain their current conditions, their current positions. And so this person, Seferin, was the leader of the effort to stop them and mobilizing the fans of Europe to stop these owners from creating a separate globalized league. He talked about greed and selfishness, but also about soccer's importance in the fabric of European culture, even the British, right? And the lives of the millions who follow the game across the continent. He then made his direct pitch to the English clubs, because it was 6 English clubs that started this and their owners. The one who he had written into the first drafts hour earlier. And so, this person, after he won and the club owners backed down, he released a statement welcoming him back, the English teams in the European fold. Of course, it was Britain that voted to leave the European Union. He started to respond to the thousands of messages that had swamped his phone. So please respond to the following statement. The failed Super League project shows the strength of nationalism in Europe versus globalization. And so, again, the drive behind this was to globalize British soccer even more. And how do I close this one? So go here, here. Oh, okay, yeah. So there. So please, left one. And oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so vote. Please respond to the following statement. The failed Super League project shows the strength of nationalism in Europe versus globalization. Because, of course, these club owners, they had an argument for why they wanted to do this. They could make European soccer a truly global phenomenon if it was separated from this commitment to helping the lesser clubs in their nation states, the lesser clubs of Italy, like all the other clubs in Italy that are not famous. Separate these famous clubs in England, in Germany, in Italy, and create a super league and make it truly a global phenomenon, like the way no, I can't even think of an example about the NFL is a global phenomenon, right? Or Major League Baseball or NBA is a global phenomenon. Popular, you make it even more popular by separating it from its commitment that the British English teams have an obligation to help and give money to Stowe and Essex, clubs you never even heard of. Okay, so I'm going to have to stop this here. And I'm going to have to shut down Zoom.